1,000 brand new electric cars glisten under the Shanghai sun, lined up like soldiers waiting for deployment. Below them, the Yangtze River flows past ancient water towns that have stood for centuries. But these cars aren't just vehicles. They're the tip of a manufacturing iceberg that's rewriting the rules of the global auto industry without burning a single drop of gasoline. This is China's electric vehicle revolution, and it is one of the most breathtaking industrial takeovers in modern history. Here are the numbers that will stop you in your tracks. China produces 70% of the world's EVs. It controls 80% of the global battery supply chain. It built 5.2 million public charging stations, more than the rest of the world combined. And almost every single piece of this EV empire was built in less than 15 years by one country, China. But before you ask how China did it, you need to understand why this wasn't just a race. It was a fight for survival. Let's start from the very beginning. Just 15 years ago, the global auto industry was stuck in the past, strangled by century-old habits and fossil fuel dependency. Every day, millions of gas-guzzling cars rolled off assembly lines in Detroit, Stuttgart, and Tokyo. But here's the problem. The world was changing, and the old guard refused to adapt. Electric vehicles were seen as expensive toys for the wealthy, with limited range, no charging infrastructure, and production costs that made profitability impossible. Think about what that meant for an industry built on combustion engines. Legacy automakers poured billions into improving gas mileage instead of investing in batteries. Consumers faced sticker shock. EVs cost 35% more than equivalent gas cars. Charging stations were rarer than unicorns, making long trips a nightmare. The whole global auto industry was sleepwalking into a future it didn't understand, while a quiet revolution was brewing on the other side of the world. China didn't just enter the EV race, it rewrote the rulebook entirely. They saw what the rest of the world ignored. EVs weren't just a new type of car, but a chance to build an entirely new industrial ecosystem from scratch. In 2009, the Chinese government and a handful of visionary entrepreneurs unveiled a plan that was almost impossible to believe at the time. Using satellite mapping to design charging networks, AI-powered factories to optimize production, and a whole-nation approach that coordinated everything from lithium mining to car dealerships, they set out to solve the EV puzzle in one bold stroke. They mapped every city's energy grid, calculated charging demand down to the minute, and invested in every link of the supply chain. No gaps, no dependencies on foreign technology. The goal was simple on paper, but almost unbelievable in reality. Turn China from a minor player in the global auto industry into the undisputed EV superpower in under 15 years, not just to make electric cars, but to make them cheaper, better, and more accessible than any gas car, while building a supply chain that no other country could replicate. Before a single Chinese EV could roll off the production line at a profit, engineers had to deal with one of the biggest, most expensive challenges of the entire project. The first battle wasn't against other automakers. It was against the cost of batteries, the heart of every electric car. In 2010, a single EV battery pack cost $1,200 per kilowatt-hour. That meant a 60 kilowatt-hour battery, the size needed for a family car, cost $72,000 alone, more than the entire price of most gas-powered vehicles. Building affordable EVs seemed like trying to make a luxury watch for $10. The problem wasn't just the materials, it was the entire way batteries were designed, manufactured, and assembled. To solve this, Chinese engineers used a clever trick that reinvented battery technology itself. Instead of building batteries like traditional car parts, one piece at a time, they designed them like layers in a cake, stacking cells directly into packs without unnecessary framing or wiring. This cell-to-pack technology, pioneered by CATL, cut battery costs by 30% overnight, like switching from buying pre-cut vegetables to chopping your own at home. Then came BYD's Blade Battery, which turned the entire pack into a structural part of the car, like using the walls of your house as part of the furniture. This not only made cars safer and lighter, but reduced costs by another 15% while increasing range by 20%. By 2020, to put that in perspective, if China decided to stop exporting these materials tomorrow, global EV production would grind to a complete halt within 6 weeks. China's charging network is equally mind-blowing. With 5.2 million public charging stations, that's more than 10 times the number in the United States. If you placed every Chinese charging station side by side, they would stretch from New York to Los Angeles 15 times over. And they're adding 10,000 new stations every single day, like planting trees in a forest that grows while you watch. But the real magic isn't just in the scale, it's in the micro details that let Chinese EVs undercut Western competitors by 30% while offering better quality. Those affordable Chinese EVs you see in European showrooms aren't built with cheap labor. They're built with hyper-efficient factories that make Detroit look like a handcraft workshop. At BYD's Blade factory in Shenzhen, robots work 24/7 with 0.01mm precision, like surgeons performing operations, assembling cars 3 times faster than traditional factories. Each factory produces a new car every 45 seconds. That's 1,600 cars per day, enough to fill 32 football fields. The entire process is controlled by AI that predicts maintenance needs, optimizes assembly steps, and even adjusts production based on real-time global demand, like a super smart chef who knows exactly how many dishes to prepare before customers even arrive. Every single component, from the smallest screw to the largest display screen, is made by Chinese suppliers within a 300-kilometer radius of the factory. This local supply chain cuts shipping costs by 80% and delivery time from weeks to hours, like having a grocery store in your backyard instead of across the country. The result? A Chinese EV costs 20 to 30% less to build than an equivalent European or American model, even with the same features. When the first Chinese EVs started appearing in European showrooms in 2019, they were seen as cheap alternatives to established brands. Today, Chinese EVs make up 25% of all EV sales in Europe, and BYD has overtaken Volkswagen as the best-selling car brand in multiple countries. In 2025, China exported 2.6 million EVs, more than the entire car production of Germany. That is not a small improvement. That is a complete takeover of the global auto industry. The numbers tell the full story. What was once a niche market dominated by Tesla and luxury brands is now a Chinese-led revolution that's making EVs accessible to everyone. A Chinese family can buy a 300-mile range EV for $22,000, less than half the price of a comparable American model. Charging infrastructure is so dense in China that you're never more than 3 miles from a charging station, eliminating range anxiety entirely. And China's EV industry now employs over 15 million people, more than the entire population of Greece. Remember the legacy automakers that laughed at EVs 15 years ago? This is what China's victory means for the world. Farmers in rural China can now afford electric trucks to transport their crops, cutting fuel costs by 70%. Families in Europe can buy EVs without breaking the bank, reducing their carbon footprint by 80% compared to gas cars. Even in developing countries like Kenya and Nigeria, Chinese EVs and charging infrastructure are bringing clean transportation to millions for the first time. This isn't just about winning a market, it's about changing how the world moves forever. Is China's EV dominance perfect? No. Its rapid growth has come with real challenges. Some Chinese EVs still lag behind Western models in software and brand perception. Battery recycling is a growing issue, with millions of old batteries needing proper disposal. And Western countries are fighting back with trade restrictions, like the EU's anti-subsidy investigation and the US's Inflation Reduction Act. But in terms of industrial scale, technological innovation, and market penetration, China's EV revolution stands as one of the most remarkable economic achievements of the 21st century. If you made it this far, you just took a journey through one of the most ambitious industrial transformations in modern history. You learned how a country went from making cheap toys to dominating the future of transportation, all without sitting through a single boring economics lecture. That is what this channel is all about, breaking down the world's most incredible stories of human progress in a way that makes you feel like you're right there, watching history unfold. If that sounds like your kind of content, hit the subscribe button and turn on notifications so you never miss our next deep dive. If you could change one thing about the global auto industry, what would it be, and how would you make electric vehicles even more accessible to everyone?